Walk into a medieval church roof, a market hall, or a centuries-old timber house, and you are looking at wood that modern sealants promised to replace, yet never truly surpassed. These carpenters were not guessing. They rejected heavy, impermeable coatings long before plastic existed, and instead relied on a method that regulated moisture, discouraged rot, and could be renewed forever. The material they trusted most was not rare, expensive, or toxic. It was breathable, alkaline, and alive in a way modern sealants are not. Medieval carpenters swore by lime-based protection, and the evidence is still standing. Medieval builders understood that sealing wood too tightly causes failure. The biggest mistake modern builders make, honestly, is believing rot comes from exposure alone. Medieval carpenters knew better. Rot actually comes from trapped moisture. When water enters wood and cannot escape, fungi thrive. Many modern sealants form these plastic skins that, crack over time, and that lets water in, but not back out. Medieval builders, they actually avoided this trap entirely. Instead, they used finishes that allowed wood to breathe, while still actively resisting biological decay. Excavations and surviving structures in cities like York, they really show us something remarkable. Timber frames protected for centuries without ever being entombed in those airtight coatings. Lime was the medieval sealant that, honestly, modern chemistry still struggles to outperform. Lime wash and lime-based coatings were, the backbone of medieval wood protection. Lime is highly alkaline, which, creates an environment hostile to mold, fungi, and insects. At the same time, lime remains vapor-permeable. Moisture can escape freely, preventing the internal dampness that destroys wood from within. This balance is why medieval carpenters trusted lime on exposed beams, walls, and structural timber. When you see roof timbers still intact above medieval stonework, such as those associated with Notre Dame, you are seeing the long-term success of breathable protection. Lime wash did more than protect. It regulated moisture year-round. Lime coatings absorb and release moisture depending on humidity levels. In wet conditions, lime absorbs excess moisture and then releases it as the air dries. This buffering effect keeps wood from staying damp long enough for rot to take hold. Modern sealants try to block moisture entirely, but medieval builders accepted that moisture would always be present. Their goal was control, not denial. You can apply this today by using traditional lime wash on sheds, barns, timber frames, and even interior beams in humid environments. The result is wood that dries naturally instead of suffocating. While application was simple, renewable, and really just a part of regular maintenance. Medieval carpenters did not treat lime as a one-time miracle. Lime wash was reapplied regularly, often every year or every few years. This renewal filled hairline cracks, refreshed alkalinity, and maintained protection without stripping away the old layers. To use this today, you simply mix hydrated lime with water to a thin consistency, brush it onto clean, dry wood, and then allow it to cure slowly. As it carbonates, it hardens and bonds with the surface, and you should reapply when it powders away. This process is forgiving, and it does not trap mistakes under permanent layers. Fire and lime worked together where rot risk was highest. In ground contact or high moisture areas, medieval carpenters combined techniques. Posts were often lightly charred to harden the surface and destroy nutrients that insects feed on. Lime was then applied to nearby surfaces to regulate moisture and discourage decay. This layered approach was far more resilient than relying on a single barrier. You can still apply this method by charring fence posts, installing them above ground when possible, and protecting the surrounding wood with lime wash instead of, those modern sealants. Design mattered just as much as the coating itself. Lime worked because, quite simply, buildings were designed to shed water. Medieval roofs were steep, the eaves were wide, and timber was, elevated off the soil. Lime just can't save wood that sits permanently in standing water, and medieval builders, they knew it. In longhouses and halls across northern Europe, including sites such as Borg, structural timber survived because, honestly, water rarely lingered. Modern builders can copy this by extending roof overhangs, sloping horizontal surfaces, and avoiding sealed joints outdoors. Modern sealants promise convenience but often create hidden failures. Lime requires patience but offers transparency. You can see when it needs renewal. It does not conceal rot until it is too late. It cooperates with wood rather than fighting it. That is why medieval timber protected with lime often outlasts modern treated lumber exposed for only a few decades. What medieval carpenters understood that we often forget. Durability does not come from permanent barriers. Instead, it comes from systems that adapt. Lime wash, combined with smart design and regular care, created wood that aged slowly and, predictably. Medieval carpenters accepted maintenance as a responsibility, not a flaw. That mindset is why their buildings still stand. How this knowledge applies right now. If you are building, restoring, or maintaining wood outdoors or in damp environments, consider breathable protection instead of plastic skins. Elevate wood, allow airflow, use lime where moisture is present, and inspect regularly. These steps cost less, last longer, and fail honestly. If this deep look at medieval craftsmanship gave you practical insight worth keeping, subscribe to Past to Live, share this episode with fellow history and survival enthusiasts, and help keep real, working knowledge from the past alive by passing it on.